Hey guys, it's Kevin with the New Warehouse podcast, and we are live again for the second time today here at Momentum 2024 with Manhattan Associates in San Antonio, Texas. And now I'm going to be joined by Ravi Maganti, who is the Director of Product Management and is focused a lot on their generative AI solution, one that they just announced this morning as well. So we're going to dive into that a little bit, and Ravi is going to help us understand what that does and how that kind of impacts the warehouse and WMS overall. So, Ravi, thanks for joining me here in San Antonio at Momentum today. How are you?
Thank you, Gun. It's great to be here, having a great conference here with a lot of new, exciting announcements, a lot of things to learn, a big crowd of customers, a lot of interaction. So, really loving it here.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely a lot of great announcements this morning at the opening session that we saw.
That's right.
We just talked about supply chain planning, and we're going to talk about generative AI here in a couple minutes. But before I think we get started diving into the new announcement and what Manhattan is doing around generative AI, I think it's good if we get a baseline kind of foundation around what is generative AI, because we hear AI tossed around a lot in a lot of different solutions, scenarios, all these different things. So why don't you help us understand, like, what specifically is generative AI?
Yes. So when we talk about AI or artificial intelligence, this is a concept that's been there on CS courses for the longest time, right? So if you ever took a CS degree, you would, even back in the 90s, you could actually enroll into a course that says artificial intelligence. Right, so it's been around the industry, and more so just from a Manhattan standpoint, for more than 2 decades, we have been building capabilities that are in the realm of AI, namely data optimization algorithms, working on machine learning use cases and such, which essentially mean that you're churning through a lot of data and trying to find optimizations. Example of that is going to be transportation planning. Having to go through multiple different DCs or deliver to multiple different stores, what's the best path to take, right? So that's something that you will iteratively get to from an initial solution to an optimal solution and so on, right? So that's one thing that we consider in that realm of optimization. From there on, you can move on to things like machine learning, where these algorithms are learning on that specific use case. For example, releasing work to a DC, optimizing how a task gets executed based on how the labor is performing, and so on, right? So those type of use cases are always there. What generative AI brought into everybody's living room and boardroom and so on is the fact that suddenly there was something like the mobile phone revolution 15 years back. There was something in everybody's hand that was actionable, and it was there, right? So what was it, right? It was something like with the advent of ChatGPT coming in and saying, tell me about all the weather patterns today, and it will understand what you're talking or typing in, and it's going to come back with an answer, which is very good, very contextual, and it sounds and feels accurate, right? So generative AI is really this technology based on these models, which are called large language models. And what they do essentially is train those models with, they call it as millions and billions of parameters and such. But really, all they're doing is putting in data in terms of words, numbers, and so on, and then writing algorithms to find matches between, okay, if there is, I'll take my name, Ravi. It literally means sun, the star, right? So I'm creating an association between those two terms and giving it a score, right? So extrapolating that to millions and billions of characters and words and so on gives you ultimately a capability with which you can go generate things, right? So that's why we call it generative AI. And in its initial days, it had the capabilities to generate text, right? So when you said text, it could be generating of poems, documents, guides, code, and so on. And now, as you can see with announcements this week by both Google in the last few months and OpenAI and other vendors, the trend today seems to be multimodal, which means video, audio, text.
Right.
It can take in all of it and produce those as well, right? So that's generative AI. In short, creating things out of certain inputs.
All right. And I think it's become, like you said, it's become such a widespread thing, right? Especially with Chat GPT, and everybody's, knows about it. They're talking about it. And I would say one of the biggest questions I get a lot is all right, how are you using AI in the warehouse, right? And I think that Manhattan now has come out with something announced this morning, right? Where it's bringing that AI or that generative AI into the warehouse type of environment. So tell us a little bit about this announcement, Manhattan Assist. Tell us what that is and what does that mean?
So we announced a new feature inside Manhattan Active. So Manhattan Active is our cloud native solutions, inclusive of warehouse management. And this feature's name is called Manhattan Assist. And the intention of Assist is to, like the other 90-day innovations that come with products like MAWM, MATM, and Omni, which are our suite of products on the Manhattan Active platform, we are bringing in this feature that will automatically be available to our customers who are on the MAWM subscriptions, which is going to enable generative AI capabilities into their solutions. Okay, so that's the overall theme of it. What we have addressed first with Assist is with knowledge bases, right?
Right.
Products like warehouse management are pretty complex behemoths to work with, configure, train. These are typically solutions that take months to implement. So what we are hoping to do out of Assist is to help consultants, customers, users understand the system, right? So if I'm trying to go configure a process inside warehouse management, like we have put away, receiving, replenishment, wave, shipping, and so on, among all these processes, you're typically going through multi-step things, and you're trying to configure the system specific to how you're going to process an order for a bulk order versus a retail order versus an e-com order, size of the item, how many items you're going to stock, velocity of the item, and so on and so forth. So among all these things, it gets pretty much into the weeds for you to understand how to do it in a system. So what Assist is doing for you is letting you ask in English simple questions or complex questions. And because it's an LLM, it's able to have that natural language understanding of what you're trying to ask, go through the entire knowledge base that we have trained it with, and come back with an actionable answers. The examples of which can be, tell me how do I configure put away into active locations in MAWM, or tell me what's the best way to ship an order which has a specific ship date. How do I configure order streaming with these specific parameters? What's the best way to set up labor planning? All of these type of questions from a configuration standpoint, as well as to understand dashboards or anything else that the application provides in general, is going to be what us is going to do to begin with. The second use case we are looking at, and that's going to be available soon, is also the summarization of configuration. So we saw today at the conference that on the Manhattan Active Omni side, we showcased the use case where you could understand what available to commerce users was that was specific to that product. But if you bring that back into MAWM, if you have like complex put away configurations or wave configurations, outbound shipping configurations, and so on, at the click of a button, we'll be able to tell you exactly what is configured, what's the implication of that, and how do you expect the system to behave as a result of that configuration, right? So these are a couple of the use cases. But then because it's a product, because it's got a 90-day innovation cycle, we expect to add a lot more feature function going into the future there as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I think, it's very important too, because as you mentioned, the WMS can be very complex in terms of configuration. And, I think when you have all of these different modules or different parts of the system and, you're trying to understand something like how is this configured now or why is it configured like this, when you're able to pull up that knowledge base pretty quickly with Manhattan Assist, I think, it makes such a difference to have that understanding. And I think, it goes a long way to increase your employees' knowledge too on that. And I imagine it'll speed up kind of the understanding, the innovation on the customer side too, to be able to utilize those tools more effectively. So why don't you tell us kind of what some of the I guess, direct benefits you would see as a customer when you start to utilize this Manhattan Assist, and then what would be some of like the positive impacts you would see within an organization?
That's a great question, Kevin.
Yeah.
So essentially, if I look at myself, I I have 20 plus years experience in this space,
Okay.
and a good part of my first decade I spent with WMS. So back in that time, I was helping build previous versions of WMS and so on. But fast forward to today, where my focus is on the platform side of things and such, I may not necessarily know how our own WMS functions to the
Yeah.
minute detail. And there I am seeing that as I'm testing this new tool, and it's just giving me that instant learning to say, here are the ways you can do it, here are the options, and so on. So what that translates to our users is whether you're doing training, whether you're trying to configure something in the solution, you're trying to understand functionality, or things like release notes, right? When we talk about 90-day release cycle, what that really means is 4 times in a year, you're getting fed with new feature functions into the MAWM product without taking any downtime, just as the way the system is architected. So automatically your solution is updated with new feature functions.
Okay.
And now you could just go in there and say, hey, Assist, tell me what's new with the 24.2 release of MAWM. And it's going to summarize that and it's going to tell you what's new. And then you can say, it has a action called follow-up. So with the follow-up, once you invoke the follow-up, it knows that you're now going to ask questions related to your previous question, which was what's new with the 24.2 release.
Yeah.
Was your previous question. And then let's say there we had a new feature called Load Builder. Now I can, as a follow-up, ask the chatbot and say, tell me more about Load Builder. And it's going to instantly bring back that information, right? So building on that, the benefits for users is going to be that if you're trying to learn the system, it becomes very fast. What would typically be a L1 or even a L2 type of support call could now be deflected or mitigated by this, because a lot of the answers that you would otherwise get from a support call can now be gotten here, or at least it would have prepared you for that call. So you know, I tried to do this, here is what documentation said, but can you tell me what's going on, right? So it's going to help improve that efficiency. And overall, with the config summarization and so on, it's going to unravel what was going to be something complex, something which was a black box earlier, and just open up that knowledge and democratize it to audience and users of the systems.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think that's such a great thing, like you said, to be able to deflect some of that and be able to, you know, have that user get an answer quicker and probably, you know, have an answer that they can expand upon too, right? Because sometimes you mentioned, you know, you have to take that support call and then you get off the call and then you're like, oh, I should ask this too, right? And then you have to call back and, you know, that whole thing. So, I mean, you're able to kind of keep diving in deeper, which I think makes a lot of sense and allows that user to kind of make the decision on just how much information do they need or do they want to get out of that, which I think is really interesting. And I think even as, you know, I imagine too, as you guys are rolling out new updates every 90 days, right, through the active platform, as those updates come out, I imagine this is very helpful too for people to understand, like, what can this update do for me and how can this update work within my organization, right?
Yeah, we've seen customers say, oh yeah, I did hear about this in the conference, but I did not know it was announced like 30 days back. Right, so all that is going to get mitigated with this type of tool.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, and I think that's really important there. So I'm curious too. I mean, tell us a little bit about, because I know this was something that was teased at Momentum last year a little bit, right? And now it's kind of officially out there. So tell us a little bit about kind of the journey on Manhattan side to have this kind of come to fruition and what went into building this Assist up.
Yeah, that's a great question. So as we all know, 18 months back is when these technologies were announced. Started with ChatGPT and then other competitors, and in fact our partners Google were not far behind. And then we got the tooling, whether it was ChatGPT, whether it was Gemini, we got the tooling to go build this. But what we started seeing initially, regardless of which vendor we used, was that it was hard to pin down the model, because you're now dealing with somebody or something that has ubiquitous knowledge of the whole world, right? So it already knows everything about warehousing,
Okay.
for example, in a generic sense. And then when you ask these questions, it was hard for us to see a accurate, unhallucinated response that was specific to our product, right? We don't want to have it answer something that's not true,
Okay. Yeah.
or go off or answer something that's not related to us and such. And then that was a challenge, to ensure that the models themselves are kind of following instructions. So no matter how much we instruct them, if they're not following the instructions and still doing things that they're not supposed to, it doesn't help anyone. So the journey took, the learning part of it was one for us to understand this technology, how it works, how its behavior is, not just asking it a couple of questions, but just going through the entire battery of everything you may want to know in a WMS or a TMS and so on, right, to make it work consistently. Because if you remember what we announced today, it was the general availability of Manhattan Assist across all of our solutions, right? That's a pretty big deal in terms of how much testing, how much compliance and audits that we need to go through to be able to just announce it across the board.
Yeah.
So I think over time, the speed of innovation that's happening just made it possible for us, because contrast to the demo we gave last year to now, these models have come a long way, right?
Yeah.
They're natively much more powerful. They listen to instructions. They have new tooling. There are things like grounding. There's things like fine tuning and better prompting and different types of promptings and such, which happen on the technical side of working on these generative AI technologies. But the end result has been that we are now able to, with great amount of accuracy, answer these questions, or just say, look, I cannot answer this question with the data that I have. Right. So that's been the journey.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's certainly, the journey has certainly played out and been able to develop into what it is today, which is great that you can announce that and spread that out over, like you said, the entire platform, which I think is a really good thing. It's not just launching in just a certain section or anything like that, which I think is really a great thing to see that. And so before we kind of wrap up here, we do want to know kind of like what is the future of this look like, right? Because we're just announcing today, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, we know with AI, right, keeps learning, right?
Yeah.
Keeps getting better and better. So what does the future of this product look like?
Yeah. So for those of you who subscribe to any of our active solutions, you know that from the time you subscribe to it, you are getting these constant innovations. That's going to be the nature of Manhattan Assist as well. So while we look at this with an initial release that's coming out here shortly, I'm just going to talk about quickly, in the interest of time here, from a warehouse management standpoint.
Sure.
Broadly looking at three areas. One is, it just goes into the aspects of speed and efficiency, right? So the first is going to be deploying a new DC or applying a new digital transformation or whatever you're trying to do with the DC, going through all these processes to set them up, test them. There's going to be some help there in terms of configuring the systems and testing the systems and such. The second aspect of it is going to be the operations part of it. Once you're already live with MAWM, you need something that's going to be of operational nature, right? Helping you with your operations, trying to interpret what your your shift metrics are, or how your labor is doing, and giving an understanding of data that you see and such will be the second area this will work on. And finally, we may look into some of the reporting aspects of it as well, right? Any output that's coming out of the DC in terms of intelligence reports and such can also be augmented with some of these technologies, where you can either ask or you can see the data and the interpretations that these technologies are going to give you based on the data.
Very interesting, and obviously very exciting things to look forward to. And obviously the announcement today of Manhattan Assist is certainly a big deal across the industry, and certainly something that is only going to get better over time and evolve and be able to do those things that you just mentioned. And I think, me as a former warehouse manager, certainly looking forward to the operational aspect of that too, and being able to see those different kind of things. So Ravi, I want to thank you so much for coming and talking to us here on the new warehouse, and being able to dive into this generative AI topic within the warehouse. So For all those people that have asked me before, how is AI being utilized in the warehouse? Now you have an answer. So appreciate everybody for tuning in here and joining us live. If you tuned in late and you missed the beginning, you can certainly catch the recording later on our YouTube channel or at thenewwarehouse.com. So thank you very much to Ravi and for Manhattan for having me here. And thank you to the audience for tuning in as well.
Thanks, Kevin. This has been a great pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah.